Hi, guys. Okay, so this is a juicy one, and I think something I want to say before I start, which goes for everything that I make or create, is just these are just my ideas and my perspective. There's a million different perspectives, and we balance each other out with those perspectives. So I get really opinionated about things, and I am interested in comments and disagreements and everything else in the comment section or however you want to contact me. But the point is I guess I'm making a little disclaimer for myself. I'm very passionate about my angle of things, as you can probably relate to being passionate about your angle of things. That doesn't mean that I think that I'm right above other people. So that being said, what's in my mind is this question of, is art, or is all art, political? And what exactly does that mean? So I think I have to begin here with the obvious, which is that it depends on how you define political. And that's my way in with this, because I'm somebody who's very internally oriented. My artistic practice, I've always seen it as a spiritual practice, meaning that it's my way of connecting with the world through beauty or through aesthetics. That question of what is beautiful is just a question of what attracts the mind. So it could be grotesque. There's a little bit of a paradox there, but there it is. Life has all these different textures. And this has always influenced my perspective on politics. And some people have their critiques in that it's an excuse for passivity, but critique me if you like. So I'm also a student of the Course in Miracles, and I believe I resonate very deeply with something that Marianne Williamson said the other day, which she is basically my translator for the Course in Miracles. And there's this emphasis on the absolute crucial importance of thoughts, which shape your actions in the world. And this obviously extends to art practice and everything you do. So I have two friends in my life that represent two different polar ideas, neither of which I agree with, but I'm just going to present them. I mean, agree with in their entirety. They're just perspectives, and I would like to present them. So the one is one of my friends got extraordinarily upset when somebody who is very visible in the music world, the art world, I include all the arts, discussed his perspective on the presidential election. He was disgusted by it. He was upset by it. And his statement was, art should be separate from politics. That statement completely baffled me, because I have a really hard time. I love putting things in boxes, but then when I try to do it, it's immediately apparent to me that things cannot be put into boxes. So how do you separate your passionate creating of something from what you may think or your perspective? Just question mark on that. We could digress for hours. My other friend was insistent that everything an artist does must be political. And the insinuation here, because in premise I agree with this, but the insinuation was there must always be this mind and this eye towards affecting society or making an impact on society. And I think this is what I take issue with, because we all have a very different alchemical configuration of how we show up in the world. And this is why I love astrology, because it acknowledges that through the uniqueness of your birth chart, you can actually see your unique blueprint and how that might express itself in the world. So I know that there's this movement about, I think it's something called like quiet politics or something of that nature, the word quiet. And it's just this acknowledgement that some of us are not called to march in the streets and like punch our fists in the air. I have done that, but frankly, I did it out of a sense of obligatory guilt because I felt that I was too passive and I had to do something like that. My really rooted perspective on all of this is that how you think in the world and how you move in the world is of utmost importance on just a molecular level. How you hold yourself when you walk into a room, meaning with love or with fear and defensiveness. In terms of what you actually do, that's as varied as there are human beings on the planet. Somebody might be in a cave writing a book for their entire life, and they might not even publish it. And as has happened, it might be discovered after they're dead. On the more energetic level, this idea is that all our minds are connected. So what's really crucial is that we're paying attention and that means in any given moment, as much as we can, there's a question of, am I approaching this with love? And yes, love is a huge vague term, but the meaning here that I would articulate is love means a curiosity, a willingness to see the other person's innocence, the willingness to see the others, doesn't have to be a person, the connection between us, the similarity, how we are united. It's not some kind of romantic idea of love looking like a sentimental thing. Love is simply the absence of fear. I'm taking a lot of this from the Course in Miracles. That being said, the image that I got in my mind was that could mean you're out in the street marching, or it could mean you're out in the street marching on one day and then you're in your studio on another day. I think it's really difficult to judge another person's perspective or actions because you don't know how they are affecting the world. And one example from my practice is that I integrate these mystical practices like Lectio Divina because they're ways for me to slow down and actually drop into connection, into love. It's not always easy, but that's, to me, if any of that comes through and affects my orientation in the world, affects what I make, affects how I interact with the human beings I encounter, that's pretty radical politically and more powerful than if I were to go out in the street with all of the anger and rage that I have personally within myself and try to convince other people that I'm right. And this is a principle that I have always thought that Aikido demonstrated in an embodied way quite radically. And the thing is Aikido is a martial art, but it's an internal martial art, so it's based on defensiveness. So not going out looking for a fight, basically, but seeking ways to bypass and blend with the energy that's coming towards you ultimately, even if somebody attacks you. An attack in this sense that we're talking about could be metaphysical, it could be mental, emotional, or it could be physical. So the idea with Aikido, which is very difficult to master, it's a practice, is that people sense if you have an agenda. They sense it on the most subtle levels, and you might not even realize you have an agenda. But if you come into relationship or conversation or interaction with somebody, and you have some idea in your mind of, I'm right, and I'm going to get you to come over my side, or you're wrong and I'm going to make you see that you're wrong. Resistance. I mean, think about trying to drag a toddler against their will, to do anything. It doesn't work. In fact, it makes them dig their heels in more strongly. And this has always, this just is such a deep truth, and it's very difficult and very subtle to master. So herein is the thing, is that's why the nonviolent political movements were effective. I'm not saying that there is one way. I'm not saying like that anyone that ever used violent action is wrong. I don't know, each situation is unique. But what I can say and what I do see with the nonviolence is that you allow, through respect of the other and love for the other, you allow them to come to their own truth. Yes, and you can nitpick this logistically, but that's not what we're doing here. So yeah, and the other thing that I wanted to just say, which is maybe simply another way of looking at it, I can't remember the name of the book right now. I'll put it in the notes. Fantastic little book written by an artist. But this author's comment was that if you have an agenda in your artwork, if you have specifically, it's easier to see if it's an overt political, per se, agenda. His argument, which I agree with, is that it's not art, it's propaganda. And that does not mean that it's not beautiful. It does not mean that it's not an aesthetic experience for people. But if there is and maybe this is an idealistic view of art, which reflects the way I tend to go about things from like a very metaphysical, idealistic kind of philosophical point of view. But if you're trying to convince people of something through the work you're doing, yeah, controversial, but I would say that's propaganda. To me, art is something that is received, channeled, and that doesn't have to be some highfalutin spiritual thing either. It's like you enter into a different state of mind and you might be completely enraged at the things that are going on around you. But what you're creating doesn't come, there can be rage. People create things out of rage. People create art out of rage. But the difference is that if that agenda is, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm going to try to convince you. Because the tricky thing here is, and you really experience it, I will say, I don't know if it's more than other art forms, but with abstract painting, is it doesn't matter how much you say about what your intention was. Other people will come from completely left field and be like, oh, this is what the work means to me. This is what I feel. And that's the thing, is that you create a political work of art, and you have an agenda to try to manipulate somebody one way or the other. And maybe you provoke somebody into thinking something. So you provoke somebody, but still propaganda is provocative. I would still argue that art is a window. It's a gateway into love, into the imagination, into different dimensions of the mind. I think, and maybe we're talking about degrees here, but I think the aspiration, maybe that's a good way of saying it, the aspiration, since we're all imperfect, and I'm sure my work is full of agendas that I don't even recognize, but the aspiration of art is not to try to convince anyone of anything. The making of art is a communion with what's larger than ourselves. And again, it doesn't have to be a big deal. You just, when you're making things, you shift into a different state of mind. It's receptive. Whatever that looks like for you, things come through that are different from when you're in your ordinary kind of like, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I've got to do this, to-do list mode. So, yeah. poof. I just, I think that's the end of the thought. We're going to wrap it up right there because my mind just. So yeah, thoughts, comments, perspectives, arguments, disagreements, no hate, please, no hate.